phosphorus in whatever he eats. And at some point, when he's feeling like doing whatever he's doing, he's down in the water, he blows this phosphorus out, and it starts smoking, making bubbles in the water. When it comes up out of the water, it hits oxygen and turns into smoke and flames. I mean, that was a bad thing over in Vietnam. When you got hit with a one of those kind of bombs, that's bad stuff. Potassium is a bad thing.
Oh, yeah.
So why couldn't there be? A bombardier beetle can do it. Skunks do that sort of thing. Rattlesnakes put out a poison to kill you pretty soon, and some snakes will kill you in 2 minutes. Why couldn't an animal have chemicals in their mouth, like the complicated tylosaur? When he's in the water, comes up out of the water, that stuff's spewing out of these glands in his mouth. For whatever reason, we don't know. And it's just like described in Job. People think the Bible is just made up stuff, poetry and things. They need to read it better. It's not made up stuff. All this stuff is borne out. I think there may be still animals that could do that. Maybe, there's the Loch Ness Monster keeps showing up over there in Loch Ness because it's a really deep ravine over there. They show up in the Great Lakes. Here a while back, they blocked off one of the lakes or something for a while. They had to do something. And guess what? No sightings of Loch Ness Monster or Nessie, what do they call them up there? Because it couldn't go back and forth, which to me shows, they were going back and forth. They're not a myth. So if those things are like that, they're down there. Any scientist can tell you, we know very little about the ocean. We think we do, but every day, every week, they're finding stuff down there. It's just incredible.
Oh, yeah, stuff.
So why say there's no such thing as a fire-breathing fish or fire-breathing dragon?
That's a very good possibility, something that could exist. Now, we're going to have to take a break here in about a minute, Joe, for about 2 minutes. But when we come back from the break, there's something I want to ask you. People are talking about Thunderbird a lot, and some people have claimed that they have seen Thunderbirds. They have a huge wingspan. I just want your honest opinion. Does Thunderbird exist? And we'll
okay.
That'll be right after the break. I'm going to go to break right now. We'll be back in 2 minutes with Joe. I'm going to put you on hold, Joe.
Right.
Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
Do you have a paranormal story you want to share on Night Dreams Talk Radio? You could be a guest. Email us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. And thank you.
I gaze upon the annals of time, one thing that comes through: we are not alone in this universe. It's a thought that rings true. Ancient cave dwellers drew spacecraft on the walls. It's a recurring theme. I've seen the same thing while walking late at night, and I know it's not a dream.
From Malmstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
That is me. We're back with Joe Taylor. The question I had before we took our little break there was, well, anything like Thunderbird, could they exist? Do they exist? I know there's people out trying to prove they exist. Or is there something similar to Thunderbird? Because there's so many reports of huge flying birds. Joe, what's your honest feeling about Thunderbird or something similar to it?
Yeah, I think they exist, and they have existed in recent years. I also think there's at least two things they're probably talking about. One is a giant bird that's, I think, down in Argentina. They call him Argentina avis. It's a really, really big bird, about as big as a Cessna. And it's got a wing spread, I think, of, what is a Cessna, maybe 40 feet. They're huge. And they're a bird. They look like a crow, sort of with an eagle head, I think. Then there's the pterodactyls, which that's a bigger problem because the evolutionists, for instance, the paleontologists, could accept a giant bird living today, maybe. But the pterodactyl, they just have to have that been extinct for 65 million years. And yet I've interviewed a fellow here in Crosbyton who saw one fly right over our town, right down Highway 51 next to my museum. A few months ago, a couple came in all excited to the museum. I happened to be out, but my secretary was there. They told her, where's Joe? We got to tell him this thing. They were driving back from Spur, Texas, not far from Crosbyton, not far from Highway 651, and they saw this giant bird flying over. They didn't know how to describe it, and I wasn't there to question them, but it sounded like they were describing a pterodactyl. A friend of mine from Dallas last year was telling me about, he was down the creek down there around Dallas. He turns around here, it looks like a giant blue heron coming at him. And when he gets closer, he realizes, oh my gosh, that's not a heron, that's a pterodactyl. And the thing flew over his head. A truck driver here about a year and a half ago was coming down I-30 going east, I believe. They're on the edge of Dallas. And as soon as he get the phone, he pulled over and called Ken Hovind, who's a creation speaker, and was telling him, hey, I just saw this flying pterodactyl for about 8 or 10 seconds. He flew across the highway in front of me. And and that's just one of the stories. The big bird, the Mexicans here have a name for that, ooey ooey or something like that. I should know better what the name of it is, but they have a name for that big bird, not a pterodactyl, but the big bird. The Indians, one of the tales they told, or one of the stories they told, I think this is in Oklahoma, maybe back in the 1890s, maybe somewhere in there. These thunderbirds would come in and I think they would catch their children, their infant children, or their toddler children, and carry them away. They could pick up baby buffalo. That's a big bird that can pick up a 7,500-pound buffalo baby.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, the chief told everybody, don't go up to this mountain, up on the top of this mountain. That night, these things were all up there, and a big thunderstorm came in and a bunch of lightning and killed all of them, or killed at least a few of them. And they went up there, and here's these big old dead birds laying around. So I think the reason they call them thunderbirds, we were doing an outdoor drama out here in our canyon. Actually was probably as good as New York stage. We had live horses, wagons, all kinds of people, and music, the whole deal, right out in our canyon in open air. And anyway, we were out there one, I guess it was in August. I was trying to think what time of the year it was. It's about this time of the year. And a thunderstorm starts coming in from the northwest. And ahead of it here comes a flock of vultures, turkey vultures that are common out here. And they lit in the trees not far from where we were on the edge of a dry creek. That's their roosting place. You're thinking, and why would they do that? Well, here comes a storm. So I think that what these Indians were talking about was in front of these big storm systems, here would come these giant birds because they're like vultures. They don't want to be caught out in the open flying. So again, there's too much truth to that to just say, no, they just imagine things. They didn't imagine that. They didn't make that story up to scare little children. That was a story they were telling. And speaking of Native Americans, there's a fellow up in Canada or Minnesota somewhere. I think it was an Army. Had been in the Army doing some film work or something. Anyway, he happened to have a camera. They've got a camera with him. And he's just going down the river and sees these giant birds sitting up in a tree, grabs his camera and starts filming, and gets, 8 or 10 seconds of these things sitting up there, and they're huge. When they're sitting on their perch, they're probably 4 feet high up to their heads. Pretty soon one of them flies off, then another one flies off, and he got it all on film. Now, I can't tell you more than that. I just haven't seen it on PBS or something one day. So, are they real? Yeah, they're real. And why is it so hard to get science, so-called, to accept them as well? Because they're supposed to be extinct. If nothing goes extinct, well, then the story of evolution loses a lot of its because things had to go extinct because they were inferior and they had to become superior. Like cows are superior to rhinos with 4-horned fleas. As I've said before, if cows and sheep and things like that are highly advanced, highly evolved species, oh, brother.
Well, I was watching a show this weekend, and they were talking about thunderbirds, and there's one group of guys been out trying to prove that they exist. And this one scientist said, no, they don't exist. You're just wasting your time. If they existed, somebody, who was going out looking for them would have found it by now. I disagree with that, because if you're out, who knows what the population is like of thunderbirds? I don't think there's thousands of them flying around. So if you're out looking for one, what's the odds of finding one? It's very, very slim to nothing. You're going to go out and pick an area and all of a sudden find one. And so I was listening to the scientist going, it's all hogwash. It's all hogwash. I disagree, because there's been too many reports of thunderbirds from reliable people that, I just don't think they're making these stories up. And, they're talking about wingspans, at least on each wing, of around 10 feet. That's huge.
Oh, that is huge. That's monstrous. Well, to make a statement like that's just silly. That's like I said about the coyotes and then the badgers out here. I know they're there. I've just never seen them, and I've been out there a lot of time. What if you're half a mile away, and you don't realize that animals follow certain patterns. We know about bird migration, animal migration. If you study them, you'll find out that they're going to be coming across your territory again every year and going back at the same time within a few days every year. Well, if you don't happen to know that, and you want to go out to see sandhill cranes, but you go out in August, you're never going to see a sandhill crane in Texas. Not here. And it's like the pterodactyl sightings in Papua New Guinea. I know several guys have been over there several times, and they go over there, but it turns out they don't come out that time of the year, so it's a futile trip. Other times, they're there. They can see them flying at night. Their chests glow like a bluish green light, and they can see that, but they're not flying over the village they're in, just like birds here. They don't. The little bluebirds and redbirds, you're only going to see those in the springtime. You're not going to see them now. So if you don't know those sort of things, this PhD guy is just stuff like that just irks me.
Well,
for a so-called educated man to make a silly statement like that.
Well, and then let's look at it this way too. Let's say, how many people go missing out in the woods and the forest and all that stuff? A lot. Or down by riverbanks out in the middle of nowhere. What happens if you're out there, right? Fishing or just whatever, and all of a sudden a thunderbird or some huge bird comes by, right? And looks at you. Oh, hey, there's a good meal. People vanish all the time out there. I mean, maybe that's why we don't have reports of it too, because you know what? We're probably a good delicacy to one of these thunderbirds. I can tell you that.
Well, I think it's, I can't quote anybody, but I've heard of these guys finding like caves or overhangs up on the side of a mountain